What happens when two dudes, one a retired Navy SEAL commander in Colorado Springs, and the other a hippie meditation teacher in New York City, get together to discuss living mindfully? That's a great question, because we don't know what will happen either. Raw, uncut, and unapologetic. Welcome to Men Talking Mindfulness with co-hosts John McCaskill and Will Schneider. Each week, we take an authentic dive into how mindfulness continually impacts our lives, deepens our relationships, and allows us to be emotionally alive. Now, on to the show.
All right, here we are for another episode, Men Talking Mindfulness. It is our season 4 closer. Today, we're going to be talking about developing grit through mindfulness. I'm John McCaskill here in Colorado Springs, here with my brother from another mother, Will Schneider, there in New York City. And today we want to open with the definition of grit, or one of the definitions. Grit is defined as having perseverance and passion for long-term goals. It is challenging yourself despite your fears. It is being resilient. It's having the willingness to fail again, and to fail better until you finally succeed. And that is a combination of Angela Duckworth's definition of grit and our guest today, Shilpi Mahajan. And we're very excited to have Shilpi on, and we're going to get into a little bit more bio on the show to discuss how grit and mindfulness can go together and how you can develop grit through mindfulness. And again, I'll get into Shilpi's bio here in a second, but I'll tell you what initially caught my eye. I simply jumped on Google and I did a search for mindfulness and grit. And there are two things that popped up before Shilpi's, but her article on Thrive Global popped up. I read through it and I thought to myself, okay, not only are we going to use this article as research for the show, but we need to have her on. We need to have a discussion with Shilpi. So today we're going to dissect that article. We're going to talk about what grit is, what it isn't, how it's being misused and sometimes overused. And we're going to get into more thoughts on this topic with Shilpi today. So that said, let me bring her on. Shilpi, hello.
Hi. Hello.
Hey, Shilpi.
Hi,
Great
Will.
to see you.
Yeah, likewise.
Very excited to have you here. So as far as your bio, Shilpi spent 15 years of her life as a corporate professional trying to manage her mindfulness with hardiness of the finance and transformation world. She has worked Pan-Asia and US after realizing the serious lack of emotional intelligence and empathy in existing capitalistic models and leadership across companies. Shilpi quit her job where she worked as a transformation lead, directly reporting to the CEO. She felt the major gap in organizations stemmed from the gap in today's education in providing serious social and emotional learning to children. As a mindfulness practitioner, she chose to integrate her learnings with SEL to bring it to education. Her endeavor, Fabelfy, aims at bringing mindfulness's superpower to children. Shilpi believes that stories connect and stories create. Using the power of storytelling, she wants to bring bite-sized animations and books that can be integrated into the school curriculum or a parent's day with their children. Her goal is to make mindfulness accessible to communities at large, anywhere, anytime on the globe. She is the mother of 2, and her children embody her spirit. Welcome. So happy to have you here.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Shilpi.
I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to be able to speak about mindfulness and grit with both of you.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
and
we're
together,
honored.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. But before we do that, Will, let's open the show off with our grounding practice. Develop some grit
Yes.
right here with
We're
some
going to develop
mindfulness.
develop some grit skills right now. Ways that we can actually keep that grit flowing, right? By being responsible, right? By understanding where, like, if I'm becoming like way over emotionally kind of off center or like overwhelmed with something else that's going on in my life, I can just take a couple breaths, remember where I am, who I am, what I'm here to do. And then after this little breath break that we take, then we can move forward with and get on with hopefully with whatever we want to do with a clearer mind, a more open heart, and a more energetic and more willing self. So, and we could just achieve that by simply becoming aware of our breath and slowing our breath down. So let's just work very simply with that. So again, in a grounding practice, I think it's also helpful to get physically grounded. So you can put your feet on the floor. You can bring maybe your hands down on the table or bring them onto your lap. So you're really making some good contact, right? So you can get into the here and now. Anytime we access sensation through touch or smell or sound, it's always here and now. Close the eyes if you like. Shilpi's already in there. She's in the zone already, right? Close the eyes if you like, or if you're driving or doing something else, keep the eyes open. You can breathe and keep your eyes open. Okay, we'll start with a nice exhale out the mouth. Okay, we're going to take a big, giant inhale for 5 seconds through the nose. 5, inhaling. 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale out the mouth. Let it go. 5, 4. Let it go out. 4, 3, 2, 1. And again, repeat. Inhale for 5. Exhale out the mouth. Very nice. Do one more of those. Inhale. Let it go and exit through the nose, or empty it through the nose or through the mouth, your choice. We're going to take 3 breaths. We're going to do a nice little triangular breath, where we're going to inhale for about 5 seconds. We're going to hold the breath for 5, and then very deliberately and intentionally exhale out the nose for a long count of 5. Right, we're going to do this 5 times, right? And then we'll start the show, right? Exhale out to begin through the nose. Inhale 5. Very nice. Hold 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale out the nose really smoothly for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. In again. 5. Hold gently. Relax face, jaw, and shoulders as we hold. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale out. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Couple more. In for 5. Holding 5. Exhaling 5, 4, 3. I know, New York City in the background, but this is part of it, right? Letting go of that sound, right? And just being with the breath. We got one more. Inhale for 5. Hold 5. Exhale 5. Good. Just stay here for a moment. And I think part of the resilience and grit that I developed in the city is just right here, right now, like not trying to get frustrated or angry about like something that's in the way of what our experience of bliss or mindfulness or peace should be, right? It's all part of it. It's our relationship to the sound. It's a relationship to our environment that really helps us, and changing that relationship that really helps us develop more of this grit and this mindfulness. So you can wiggle your jaw or head a little side to side if you like. When you're ready, open up those eyes, and we are back, and we'll start the show. And that car right now, that has been, it's parked in a different place, but it's been going on like in the middle of the night. I think it's like a problem with the alarm. So I'm just going to, get frustrated with that alarm right now. But it's just like, oh my God, like why? It's the same horn. It's the same car. So, all right. So
we'll get you in a recording studio, Will.
I know. I'm trying, guys. This is what we got right now. So good. Well, thank you for being here, Shilpi. And it's wonderful having you.
Yep. Thank you so much. I just thought that like for that moment, it's an excellent way to actually practice your sound meditation with that consistent background noise. You can actually do mindfulness of sound.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very
indeed.
true. Very true. Just accepting and being harmonious, but like an annoying. I mean, I guess I shouldn't even judge it and call it annoying. I'm learning that, by me saying it's annoying, then therefore the relationship that I create with that, it's just like, oh, it's frustrating to me, instead of being like, it's just sound of the environment. It definitely is a little, I guess, disruptive, which another judgment, but here we are. So, I'm trying.
Shilpi,
work in progress.
We read your bio there, but I'd love to kick it off just by getting to know you a little bit better outside of your professional bio. And we even got to hear a little bit before we hit record about who you are and how you came to do what you're doing. And I'd love for you to share, if you would, a little bit more about yourself that wasn't formally covered in the bio.
I mean, I have been practicing mindfulness for nearly now 10 years and a yoga practitioner since I was a child. So I essentially grew up in the tradition. I'm an immigrant to the country. So I'm from India. And as part of my culture, my family culture, we were taught yoga very young by my father. So I'm really steeped into the practice. And one of the challenges that I had very early on in my corporate career, which was also a deep dive into my entrepreneurial journey, was the cognizant dissonance that I had when I went into the corporate world. There was like this strong emphasis on success, of being an achiever, which kind of did not gel well with my practice of slowing down and pausing and being in the moment. And that essentially dissonance, I sort of started dissecting the root of the dissonance, and it went back to literally the childhood when I started yoga, but at the same time, I started my, the academic journey and the stress of school life and why we are not taught like essential life skills when we are in school. And then when I went back into that journey of my life, I realized that there's a big gap between what we are taught in school and what's expected of us when we get into life. And the most important thing that I felt was missing in our society was the lack of emotional intelligence. And when we get into corporate world, that dissonance kind of splits us apart because we are expected to be a certain person and we are not. And that's when all the stress starts building up because we are sort of pulled in two directions. So I personally believe that was kind of missing from the storyline, and I thought I'll just add it here.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And it's great that you've identified that gap, and there definitely is that gap. I've seen it in the military. I've seen it in corporate America. I've seen it in families and just in people in general. And developing a stronger sense of emotional intelligence is hugely important to a sense of fulfillment and a sense of connection with everyone around you. So I applaud your efforts there and what it is you're doing. Over to Will.
Yeah, I thank you for filling that gap as well, because I see it in way too many people in my life, and just by being more mindful, practicing mindfulness, we become more emotionally intelligent naturally. But it is a consistent practice, and then grit is kind of is a big part of this. So, how did you come to write this article about grit and mindfulness? Like, was that part of that gap that you're trying to fill? Like, because, so jump in on that.
So the idea of whole grit actually comes from my work with children, and this whole, essentially even trying to balance my own parenting, like, how to be a more whole parent and how to provide a more whole education to my children. So I sort of found my daughter, who's now a high schooler, she's a sophomore, struggling with, her grades. So essentially, because the whole education system is so centered around grades and, getting your SAT scores and going to the right college. And I kind of heard from her school counselor that she's not like performing well. And I had seen her working hard and doing well in school. And during the process, we also, this house, actually, we had a fire. So this house was just right before COVID, was burned down to the ground. So my kids were actually dislocated from, all of us, our entire family was dislocated from this location to another location. And we were dealing with the COVID crisis. And obviously, I felt that the kid is going through so much emotionally, and that's sort of translating into her academic output. Whereas what the school is not, the part that the school is seeing is just her output, her achievement, and totally missing on the internal journey that she's going through. There I saw that there was grit there. She's working hard. She is trying to balance her inner life with the demands of a world that is just focusing on achievement. And that's when I sort of realized that there's a difference between how we define grit and how we define success in the world. Because for me, she's as successful as can be. She managed to, give in her homeworks and do everything that she was expected of. It's just that she was just marked up. She was just a little away on the standards that the school was expected of her. And that's when I came with the concept of whole grit. I mean, that's one of the part of the stories, but also I've been working a lot with juveniles in detention center. And I also work with people who have addictions. And that's where I realized that, these people are trying to have an inner journey with themselves and they're trying to be better people. But we are not really, we need to reorient ourselves as a society to really define what grit is. So that's where the whole story just came from.
Well, I'm going to quote your article here in a second, but it's interesting when you talk about your child not doing well at school, right? Yeah. And what happens seemingly in American schools, and I was a product of this, and I think it's just gotten worse because the competition at a very young age. I mean, you're talking about college at like 13, 14, 15 years old and SAT scores. And, it seems like we've created a society of achievers, right? And or just like creating a mindset of achievement and what that looks like instead of like well-adjusted human beings, right? Which is going to create a more well-adjusted society, and then what happens also, I mean, as a child, as a younger person who, is just learning about this SEL, their emotional, and social learning, what happens when you don't achieve? That's then you get more guilt, you get anxious, you receive more shame or something like that. And that's really going to deeply hinder your ability to learn. But you say, so I think, the quality of grit seems to have been hijacked by overachievers, right? Defined by long hours, extreme tenacity, sacrifice, or kind of do whatever it takes mentality. In your Thrive article, you state, and I quote you, what about empathy and compassion? What about kindness? What about the one who served food in the soup kitchen every Sunday? Is he not gritty? What about the one who relentlessly rescued every single pup and kitten? And what about the one who smiled at every single person he met? Isn't this grit? Isn't it all resilience? Not defined in terms of success, wealth, and status, but purely in terms of the one thing that matters, the human spirit. So, yeah, tell me a little bit more about what you mean by all this.
So, around us, there are multiple human beings who are sort of doing one little thing every single day. Like, they're being resilient with their efforts. Like I said, like somebody who's rescued every single pup and every single kitten. I have a neighbor who has been for years now rescuing dogs who are sent to be euthanized. Now, I mean, what would you call that? Like, that's not really achievement in the way the world defines it, right? I mean, it's not, it's something that they're passionate about and they're not looking for accolades, but it's something that's bringing them contentment and joy in the real sense. And to me, that is a way of being resilient. Somebody who's been, I have somebody I know who has been trail running for years now, and she recently lost her husband to cancer, and yet she's constantly trail running. Now, we are not talking about those achievers. We are not talking about grit really in the traditional sense there. There are people who have, I have multiple stories of whole grit. So, is it okay if I share those here?
Please
go for it. Yeah, please. Yeah.
So I met this person recently, and she lost her entire family to cancer, and now she's remarried and doing well in her professional career. But the most important thing is that she overcame those setbacks in her life and moved on. Isn't that grit? Like, isn't that resilience? Or even a child who's like moved from say 40% to 60% in his academic career, or somebody who's, who's not, say, been into fitness their entire life, but made that first step towards moving into fitness and making a transformation in themselves. So, I mean, this kind of, reminds me of habit. Every time you create a new habit, to me, that is a step towards being gritty. Every time you're becoming a better person, 1% better than what you were yesterday or the moment before, that is, to me, being gritty. And that, to me, should truly be how we define whole grit as a society, and not as, people who have, turned pages and done and achieved, different things, because often that achievement comes at a cost, and we don't talk about that cost. And that cost is often in terms of vulnerability, in terms of lack of empathy, in terms of lack of compassion, and in terms of a whole lot of stress.
Yeah. Well, I think it's also, sorry, John, I think it's these, what really helps us to develop more grit and resilience are these micro moments of grit and resilience. So, doing things like, it takes 66 days or 100 days to form a new habit. That takes a lot of dedication, a lot of time. And a lot of what we said earlier, I guess in your, where do we say it? Oh, in your definition in the beginning, right? It's having the willingness to fail again, and to fail better, which I really like. Fail better until you finally succeed. And that's what really creates a true achiever, in the sense of, like, in those little micro moments of fail and fail again, as you try to develop this new habit that might even just create, like, you might only get 1% better, but you're still better than you were the day before. This is what really develops more of that resilience and that grit. So when you do get like a big project or something, or thrown into your lap, you already have developed, those grit muscles, if you will, that'll help you, maintain that stick-to-itiveness that's required in order to really succeed in whatever that endeavor that is in particular. And I have something here. It's like, I love how you're talking about grit and resilience, because it's really about the journey instead of always being about the destination, right? You have something like whole grit. It builds an element of curiosity and non-judgment, of being in the process rather than the product, which I love you making that distinction. If you want to kind of elaborate on that.
So, I mean, the interesting thing about, the way I look at grit, and also about mindfulness, is when we usually try to bring our life as goal oriented. We try to say, I have a goal to be 10 pounds lighter. I'm just giving an example. Okay. but the thing that really matters is how we change our life to make it system oriented, which is, what are the systems that I create around me so as to change my life for the better, to transform it? Like, can I make a 1% change in, say, the number of steps I take? Or can I change 1% change in how I eat? Like those little, like James Clear introduced the concept of atomic habits.
Atomic habits.
So am I making those little atomic habits every single day, and create a system to make those habits sustainable? Because the main thing that where people fail when it comes to systems is that those systems are not really sustainable. So the moment we change our mind from a goal-oriented life to a system-oriented life, we can really develop grit and be more sustainable in achieving whatever we like to achieve, or however we define our achievements. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Yeah, sure does. Will just like you had?
No. I just So this, like, so just that, I like that distinction between, time oriented, right, or goal oriented versus system oriented. And I know you mentioned about, yeah, if I've never heard of any of this before. Like, I have, but I'm just being, playing ignorant right now, or just like a new student or something like that. So what, like, systems, like how is that going to help me to be more of who I want to be, or achieve more of what I want to achieve, whatever that may be. What does that look like, the systems orientation?
So, I mean, you essentially create a system, a process. Like, I mean, it's like, I mean, how do I explain it? Say, for instance, you want to create a better product, and the product here is you, right? I mean, or say a better pencil. I have this pen in my hand. You better. So the way you do it is by creating an entire supply chain that, an entire system, an entire value chain that essentially focuses on building a better pen. So for instance, again, I come back to, say I want to write a book. So how do I go about creating a system wherein that goal is not the be all and end all of all, but the writing. I mean, I become the writing. I become the process itself. So every single day I sit down and I jot down a little something, and I start enjoying that process, and I start, being the process rather than, just thinking about writing a book. So I said this time, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. and, pen down my thoughts. So I think that is a shift in being in a system rather than being in a goal. You sort of like, you become the dance. You become the dance. You're not the dancer, but you are the dance. You're not the writer, but you're the written word. And you sort of develop an identity around it and say, okay, I am this. And you start off, you kind of create little habit changes around that whole process.
And that requires a lot of discipline, for sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
So quickly, Shilpi, your image is frozen on my computer. Oh, there you go. Now you're back.
She's good over here, John. But yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. Good. I just want to make sure it wasn't system-wide systems. So anyhow, you also talked about bringing compassion and empathy and vulnerability into grit, which are not normally terms that people associate with grit. Why, for you, is vulnerability such an important part of building grit?
So I think we initially spoke about failure, right? I mean, you fail and you fail better. And you can't fail better until you build vulnerability into the system. Because often with the way the society is built, with failure comes shame. And unless you develop the ability to handle that shame, to be vulnerable with yourself and tell yourself, oh, look, I failed, you can't move on to the next step. And that to me is an important part of a grit process. I mean, you can't like shove things under the carpet and say, and also because vulnerability is a moment of self-reflection too, it's a moment of awareness, right? I mean, I am feeling this, or I'm facing this, and I'm facing this because of this. And what is it that I can do to change it? Or am I okay with it? Like if I fail, I'm okay. It's okay. I mean, we often talk about like here in mental health, right? I mean, it's okay not to be okay. So it's okay. Right. It's okay to fail. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to feel that shame. It's okay. So that's why I think it's an important part of being gritty and, being resilient.
Without that self-reflection, which I really love that you tied vulnerability to self-reflection, without that self-reflection, in that, like, we're never going to be able to fail better, and it's in the failure that we learn. If we always were succeeding, right, on everything we ever did, like that, well, that's impossible, because success and failure are two sides of the same coin, right? But it's like, you bring up some great, what we are at our core, we talk about on the show all the time, are emotional beings. Feeling beings with our feeling brain. And the more we get into that's SEL, the social and emotional learning, and we learn about ourselves at this emotional level, then we don't have to be drowned by the fear, the guilt, or, the shame that comes along with failure or not aspiring to some sort of goal, perhaps. But that really is like such I mean, John, you're really a big fan of grit. Like, that's a huge component
I
of grit. It is so. I mean, talk from your own experiences if you like.
Oh, absolutely. I am in full agreement, and I'm in full agreement, but I've never heard it kind of weaved in with vulnerability and the SEL side of things, and I love that, and I fully agree. And what you mentioned, Will, doing that introspective work and reflection, and kind of figuring out who you are and where you want to go, and then how you failed, but also why you failed, right? And figuring out and learning from that, and then failing better. You've heard the term failing forward, right? Fail forward, and learning from those failures. And I mean, it's only a failure, a true failure, if you don't learn from it. That's how I see it. If you fail and you learn, that's an experience, and you're going to be better for it. And as far as that introspective work, Shilpi, you talk about in your article how mindfulness helps to develop grit, but you talk about how exploring your mind is such a massive opportunity to let go. And a lot of the time, people are afraid to explore their minds. They're afraid to be alone with their thoughts or alone in their quiet mind and see where things go. Can you explain what you mean by not exploring your mind is such a massive opportunity to let go?
So, I mean, you both are mindfulness practitioners, right? So, so every time we tend to sit with our thoughts, and every time we tend to sit with our feelings, or just sit with our breath, is a massive, to me, unraveling moment of our habit patterns, right? I mean, it's very hard to actually reflect on your own self and your life, and to see how you became who you are, right? I mean, how did you develop those specific habit patterns? I mean, neuroscience now sort of backs all of this, right? I mean, the more of what you do, the more of that you become. And in the letting go process is not just the letting go of your thoughts and feelings, it's also a part of you that's sort of is making you repeat those behaviors. Like, for instance, I mean, I'll give you my example. I used to really, really overthink. I used to read into people's minds before, they even, spoke to me. Like, I would like just imagine things, and I would, he's not talking to me because, of a certain reason. Or, I mean, it happens to all of us, right? I mean, these little storytelling that we tell ourselves, and those are all, it's a philosophy of samskaras. Those are all like, habits that we have formed over the course of our life, what our mind has learned as we grew older. And those have sort of become our reactionary modules, right? I mean, I call it a module sort of a thing. So when we sit with ourselves and we are able to sort of dissect our reactionary modules, why we are reacting a certain way, we are able to take a pause and let go of that habit of reacting and sort of responding to every single moment of our lives. So here I'm not saying let go of a past event, or let go of, a hurt, or I'm saying let go of yourself, like let go of a part of yourself that is making you behave a certain way, or think a certain thing, or feel a certain thing, because that part was sort of formed over multiple years of experiences. So, I mean, I don't know.
No, I like it. That's really what you're kind of, what I'm hearing is you're kind of asking to get to center, and we're in the center, we're in the here and now. So therefore, it can be like, oh, okay, that's shame that's bothering me. Oh, that's just an imaginary thought about somebody that hasn't even, just the way they showed up in the room. I'm like making some massive imaginary assumptions about that person, which has absolutely no basis in any kind of reality or fact. Right. So just by being more mindful and being, that's why, that's why John and I, that's why we do the show, right? To teach people, or to help people move into the direction of mindfulness, whether that's a contemplative practice like journaling or meditation, or finding your breath to get in the here and now. So we can kind of, we should have maybe a second name, John, like, something about like, grounding yourself, men grounding themselves, or like, or just, that's a terrible name, but you know what I'm saying? Like, just like get in.
You just told yourself a story about the name, Will. I thought it was really good. It was a negative story that you told yourself.
Well, maybe it will work, right? What the hell do I know? But that's like what all of this, what this work is about, is letting go of the stories, and getting in. And you even mentioned it's also, we have learned behavior. Like if we have parents or people that are siblings that are very reactionary and have never really developed mindfulness and emotional intelligence that comes with mindfulness, or just, that those opportunities just stop, right? Just to stop and stop reacting and just take a moment and breathe. That's how, we can continually move through the world in that way, for sure.
No, I mean, coming to parents, I'm always talking about whole parents. So I just wanted to add a little bit here. So we all become a parent's parent. Like, we become the parents that our parents were, right? Those are learned behaviors that we had acquired subconsciously. So part of that letting go is also letting go of that parent that you had acquired. And that comes with a lot of reflection, self-reflection into your own parenting habits. And, unless you do that inside out work with yourself, you can't really become a whole parent either, like whole human beings, whole parent. So, yeah.
It takes those moments of stopping and reflecting and meditating and just noticing where you are. Excellent.
Exactly.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the whole parent piece, and I am definitely becoming more like my father as I'm got young ones. I see my father in myself a lot, and that's not a bad thing. I love my father, and I think he taught me well. But there's some things that I'm sure he would like to not have as his fatherhood, and some of those are bleeding over into me. But that leads me to my next question. As a parent, how can we teach and model grit for our children, and how do we tie mindfulness into that?
So I think children are constantly watching you, right? Children learn through modeling, right? The more you model, the more they learn. So the mindfulness part is the easy one to teach the kids, because I think kids are by their very nature mindful. You put a child into a sitting practice and you'll see them close their eyes and be into a meditative state instantly. So if you have like a regular practice every morning where they know that, okay, my mom and my dad, they are like sitting and practicing, you can practice with them. There are beautiful practices out there like blowing bubbles or blowing on your hand, candle breath, that you can do with the little kids. And for teenagers, you can do your regular breathing practices and, your body scans. And they're just knowing that the parent is mindful will bring in mindfulness. The other practice that I recommend, and which also ties a lot into grit, is feeling my feelings. Like, talk to children about feelings. Have a mood meter in your house and
what do you mean by that, a mood meter? What does that look like?
So a mood meter can look like an arc with different colors. Like blue is calm, red is angry, green is happy, yellow is, you can define your own feelings as you'd like to. And you can tell, start when they're young, because then it's easier for them to talk about feelings. What are you feeling today? Are you feeling this color? Are you feeling green? Are you feeling blue? And the more they talk about the feelings, it's sort of builds a bridge between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex neuroscientifically, and sort of calms them down instantly. So, and the more you talk about feelings, the easier it is to talk about things like vulnerability, shame, failure, or what it means to do well, or any other conversation that you'd like to bring in. And that essentially then finally moves into grit. So we are not looking at grit from the perspective of, okay, wake up at 4 a.m, now you do your work, now you go for your run, or do your sports or things like that. We're talking more from a point of view of feelings, wherein we say, okay, what are you feeling today? Happy. Why? Because I worked hard for like this long, or what are you feeling today? Sad because I didn't do well. And it's okay to be sad. It's okay to feel that. Can we move on from here? Or can we breathe for some time and accept that feeling and move on? So in a way, you're kind of creating more emotionally intelligent beings, and in the process creating grit, like whole grit, as I call it.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And that is so important, to be able to be with your feelings and not push them aside, right? If it's sadness, if it's anger, frustration, these quote unquote negative feelings, if you're able to be with them, that in and of itself helps to develop that emotional intelligence, but two, because it's uncomfortable to be with those feelings sometimes, it helps to develop that grit. So I think that's genius. Yeah. And some of these things, I'm going to have to go back and watch this episode myself, because I'm going to bring them back to my little kids. I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. Granted, the 6-month-old is probably not going to learn a whole lot just yet on this, but our 4-year-old, we have a time in corner rather than a time out corner. And it has some of the things that you mentioned, Shilpi, is it's got different pictures of different expressions for basically cartoon faces. And we'll like, for example, if my 4-year-old gets upset, I'll take her down to the time in corner and I sit there with her, or my bride will sit there with her. And rather than, sending a kid to a corner to be by themselves, I'll send our child down to the time in corner, sit there with her and say, okay, what are you experiencing right now? And a lot of the time she'll point at the face that's frustration or annoyed. And she's gotten to the point where she knows what those emotions are. And, I will do something as a parent inadvertently that frustrates her. I mean, parents always do that, like planned or unplanned. And I'll say, hey, what's wrong, baby girl? And she'll say, I'm frustrated with you. And like, oh, wow. For a 4-year-old to say that, I think that's great. But it comes back to the fact that she's okay to be with that emotion and then to voice it to her father.
Yes.
I think that is where we
communicate,
communication, exactly, Will, where we probably as a human species, we lack, is that we'll feel these emotions and either we'll hide them from ourselves or we'll hide them from others. We won't voice them, and we'll go through life passive aggressive and just destroy relationships because we're not gritty enough to, one, be with the emotion, and two, voice that emotion. So I love everything you're talking about. I love it.
Well, as I'm hearing you say all this, I feel like this is a recipe for a lot of the men that are out there in the audience, right? Because a lot of them are locked in this, this like 10 and 12-year-old little boy, right, that has never had and developed the emotional intelligence and the ability to communicate in order to, express where they are. I mean, this goes for anybody out there that right now has the inability or unwillingness, or never really took the risk, if you will, to really communicate how they're actually feeling, right? And what that looks like, and delve into that. I mean, I think, John, as we do more of this men's work, this show is for everybody, but we have a lot of men that are attached to us, like developing, more of these opportunities, whether it's like in workshop or something like that, or retreats as we grow, to be able to find a way.
We'll bring Shilpi in as a speaker at one of our retreats.
It'll be perfect. And then, you got to get the emotion meter up there, right?
There you go.
We're gonna very I'm frustrated. Wow.
There you go.
But this is
No, I think, this is like the kind of work that you should do as a family, right? If you're doing it with your daughter, are you doing the same back to her? Like, how can I share what I'm feeling right now? you're teaching her to vocalize her feelings, but it's something that you can do as well. I do it with my husband. So my husband is also like the typical guy who doesn't wouldn't really express.
They're everywhere. They're absolutely everywhere.
Everywhere. They're everywhere. Because I think that's also the subconscious conditioning that, it's a habit pattern, right? You were taught to not share your feelings. So you were taught to, because that was a sign of grittiness, like that was a sign of being strong. So that just leads to miscommunication, and it just messes up relationships. But the more you talk about it, the more it just improves your relationships with your peers, with your friends, with your family, with your children. I think it's such an important part of just sitting and accepting of what you are and who you are and what you are feeling in the moment, and to be able to vocalize it, to have that vulnerability to say, okay, I'm hurt today, or I'm just feeling low, or I'm feeling depressed, rather than, okay, I'm going to suck it up and I'm going to move on. I don't care. And as a result, reflect it back to everyone around you, because those are ripple effects that affects every single relationship that you're in.
And like by actually verbalizing, right, you're inviting somebody into that feeling with you, or at least to, that's where empathy is, right? It's the communication with somebody else, right? And therefore, and that requires vulnerability. And also the only way out is through, right? If you just want to shut down your shame or your guilt and not verbalize it, what happens, right? Then it comes out in being violent or yelling at somebody, or it just comes out in some really ugly ways because of that unwillingness, right? Which grit is a willingness to go there, to get into the arena, like John, I like to say sometimes, and then just to stand in whatever is going on, right? But knowing where you want to go and moving forward with that. I love that.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that the only way in is through, right?
The only way out is through. The only way out. So if you're stuck in shame, right? I acknowledge that shame, right, and communicate that to you or John or whoever else is in that place. Then it's just like the other person with their energy, with their knowledge, hopefully, they're able to maybe carry me through, or just let me know that it's like, don't take yourself so seriously, Will, or something, and help me move through it. Yeah. Wow.
Fantastic. Shilpi, you got any more questions, John? Will?
I just have one, thing. I just want to go back to failure, and I would love to what are some of your effective strategies for dealing with failure? I mean, because, that is part, if you want to really achieve anything and achieve in this whole grit kind of thing, we're going to fail. We're going to fall down and fail many, many, many times. So what are some effective strategies that you might, help our audience, find or to kind of move through and failure, please?
So I think I'll have to think through to answer this one, because I can talk about it from a very meditative point of view. So for me, whenever I failed, and I have failed like quite a bit in my life, and I think one of the most effective strategies for me per se has been the acceptance, the radical acceptance of what is in that moment. Like, often we keep on, sometimes the failures literally, so the first thing is like there is a lot of, what's the word? Avoidance, I have failed. There's still a way through. I can still make it, but acceptance is not there. So just having that radical acceptance, just meditating on it, meditating on the whole process itself for me has been a very liberating process in, first of all, accepting my failure, and then moving on from that failure, moving on and taking that next step, because often we are stuck in that moment where we failed, and we can't take that next step to move on and to take another risk, to take another chance. And in those moments, I think a very effective strategy, once you've done that radical acceptance, is affirmations.
Okay,
constantly identifying yourself as somebody who can do it, like not like in a pretty sense, but who identifying yourself to be that person and affirming that to yourself. I'm positive. I can achieve this, or I'm optimistic. Because often we fall into the quagmire of pessimism once we failed multiple times and we are not able to rise from there. And it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because we are already sitting in a pessimistic place. And when we move forward from there, we become that person again. But if you keep on affirming that kind of helps. So those are two effective strategies. There's a beautiful meditation also that I do, which I can share a little bit. It's basically imagining your future self or whoever you want to be. It could be a personal transformation, it could be a professional transformation, but imagining yourself sitting on top of that hill as a person, and then your current self at the base of the mountain, and then you sit with what it's going to take to get there. So just sitting with that process itself, and what are the systems that you're going to create to be that future self. That meditation itself is very powerful in helping you overcome your failure.
Yeah, it'll help you see that higher self continually. Yes. Instead of like, and we're talking about feelings, instead of being consumed by the feelings of failure, which what a lot of them, it's just like, okay, well, hell yeah. And again, without failure, we could not succeed. But again, there is no failure if we are taking that failure, learning from it, kind of recycling it into something that's positive with the affirmations and the meditations. Or, I like to, talk to some people that I really love and admire, and who also have done their own work, and they have achieved and they are successful in their life, and talk about where I could have done things a little bit better, or, how I could have done things a little bit better, and reaching out. Or journaling has been, a big way for me to kind of get to that more, affirmation kind of mindset, and moving forward in a positive direction, but being being very strategic, by calculating, oh, well, that didn't work at all with that little piece of failure I just had, but how can I, use that knowledge? It's just knowledge, really, what failure is. It's an opportunity for growth, and then you can move forward with that. So thanks for sharing that.
No, I think journaling is an excellent tool. I personally don't journal so much because, though I ask people to journal if they like it. It's different for different people. I also use a technique called reflection, wherein you sit at the end of the day, and which is like a mental journaling sort of. It's not like you're not writing down. So you actually mentally go down the memory lane of your whole day and start with the time you wake up, and go through your life as like a witness, as an observer. So it's sort of also, it's again a great practice actually now when I think of it for failure, because you start to separate yourself from your failure. So once you're observing all of that, you're like, okay, that's not me. I'm just an observer. I'm like, so you can, once you separate, again, you can do the mental journaling or you can do the written journaling. But that kind of is a great strategy to actually separate and be a witness of your life, which is what technically we are trying to do, separate ourselves from.
Yeah. Well, I know. It's like, we're separated. So a failure is just an event that happens in our life. It's not, I'm not a failure. It's just an event. You know what I mean? And I think, that is a wonderful distinction. Thank you. And I don't have to, live the feelings of failure because I had a failing moment, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent.
And then coming back to what you said, Will, before, the only way out is through, and taking a look at that failure and coming out as a success, or someone who is not a failure. You have to go through that. You have to go through it. You have to take a look at it, and what did you learn from it? So I love all that. Well, Shilpi, this has been amazing. What is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to cover? And then lastly is, how can people find out more about you and Fabelfy if they wanted to know more?
So I think this has been an excellent discussion. It's left me with thinking, I mean, I never, like, for instance, this entire reflection process that I do every day, like, I sit for like 10 minutes and reflect on the day, like the mental journaling that I do. I never thought that I could really look at it also because, I mean, we're always trying to be a witness. So I never really looked at it as a strategy to handle failure. So sort of was a great discussion and learning experience for me as well. And I want to listen to this episode to self-reflect on things that I actually spoke about and, and also what both of you shared, because I think it's been an excellent to and fro. People can find me on Twitter at Fabelfy. That's where I'm the most active.
Okay.
And of course, on my website, fabelfy.com. And
you want to spell that for us? Make sure we get that. Spell that for us if you can, please,
yes.
Shilpi.
Fablefy.com. And I have the YouTube channel with the same name.
Great.
Yeah. So we have about 100 videos, bite-sized animations for children, which even parents and educators can use. We are about in 1,000+ classrooms in this country. And
fantastic.
Yeah. So
I just subscribed.
Thank you.
Yeah, Fabelfy, the whole child. You also have meditations on this too.
Yeah. They're all
which are wonderful.
Meditation. Yeah, they're all like small, bite-sized. So if you start your day with your children, you can like put a 2-minute meditation, a breathing meditation, a body scan, or after they come back, and have a healthy discussion once they have self-reflected and paused around how their day was, and make it like a mutual discussion, not just speaking to them about them, but also sharing how your day went. And I think those are the best places to find me. LinkedIn, I'm
beautiful
as Shilpi Mahajan. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's like you have some really great meditations here. So go ahead, John. Yeah.
Well, that's actually what leads me into my next comment. Normally, the way we kick it off, or we kick off the show with a grounding practice and we end the show with a grounding practice. Normally, we do one or the other. Myself does I do the opening and Will does the closing, or vice versa. So I'm going to throw a zinger out at you here, Shilpi, and you feel free to turn me down right here. If you're comfortable, I would love to have you do the closing practice for us, a 3-4 minute closing practice, if you're comfortable. If not, I'm happy to take it. I'll throw that out to you.
No, I can do it.
Oh, that'd be fantastic.
You're right. I love when our guests do it. It's awesome. I'm not like you're not excellent, John. I'm just saying I love when our guests.
Okay. So sit in a comfortable position wherever you are, your face, neck, and back aligned. Just gently close your eyes and bring your attention to your breath. Breathe in. Breathe out. Just watch your breath as it enters through your nose. Watch it with curiosity, without judgment, with compassion. Watch it as it enters the nose. It's entering from your left nose or your right nose. As it enters your lungs, your belly. And as you exhale, watch the movement of the breath from the belly to the lungs and out through your nose. Just keep watching your breath with awareness, with compassion, without any judgment. Take 3 deep breaths. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. Gently rub your palms. Cover your face with your palms. Just give this moment to yourself and feel grateful. Open your eyes in the darkness of the palm. Bring your palms down. And thank you.
That was
Thank
beautiful,
you,
Shilpi.
Shilpi.
Thank you
That was
so much.
fantastic. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you for that. Thank you for being with us today. And thank you for what you're doing to really help kids and parents get in touch with their emotional sides and to be more mindful and gritty in a much healthier sense of that word. So thank you so much for being here with us today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Shilpi.
Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Absolutely. All right. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks for joining Will and John on Men Talking Mindfulness. If you enjoyed the show, please like and share it with your friends and family, and please, we would appreciate a review too. Until next time, this has been Men Talking Mindfulness. Thanks for showing up.